We have the Federal Reserve, we have a lot of European Central Bank and other central banks sort of acting this way, where they're raising the interest rates to attract more money so that they can tighten and put some bottles on inflation. But they wouldn't have to do that if Bitcoin didn't exist. So I think it's already having an effect. But the dynamic is a little bit more complex, and there are certainly incentives here. The problem is that when you raise interest rates and the debt rolls over, so you as a government owe, I don't know, $1 trillion or something like that, and then when that debt comes due, you have to roll it over into a new bond.
Excellent.
At this percentage. Well, now the interest on that debt becomes an enormous amount. So the current interest rates, I think, for treasuries, at least in the U.S., they're approaching 5%, something like that. Now the budget item for interest on that debt is going to be like, second only to military spending or something like that. So it gets to be, so they're kind of caught in a rock and a hard place. You can't have too high interest rates when the debt rolls over. So they could do this for a temporary amount of time, and this seems to be sort of the Federal Reserve's strategy, is to raise interest rates during this short window when the debt's not going to roll over as much. In the next 1, 2, 3 years, a lot of that debt's going to roll over. And once it rolls over and you have to take out new bonds at these new rates, you're going to start being in trouble, because that's
Absolutely.
going to be a lot
That's
of
what
interest.
I think, and I used to say that governments, they got some debt levels which is absolutely unpayable. Unpayable.
At least at these rates.
In the next generations, they definitely gonna pay hard for that, because we have like pension funds, normal people like acquiring those debt assets, and I don't think that in the long term, the government will have the capacity to pay back those.
Well, so the solution has always been traditionally, and I'm sure you guys are of all people are familiar with this, is devaluation of the currency. You just devalue all of the debt, and then you redo it, and bam, you don't owe so much money anymore. And that's been the playbook, but you can't do that anymore. Right, because people are putting their savings into other vehicles. A lot of people in developing countries put their money in the dollar, so you can't devalue as much locally. And people in the U.S., people in the Western world are putting their money in Bitcoin. Like devaluation is sort of not becoming an option. So you have this dynamic where they're forced to raise interest rates to put curbs on inflation, because if they don't, then they're going to lose the whole thing, where everyone goes into Bitcoin. So it feels like the system is showing its cracks, and because of the existence of Bitcoin, you can't do some of these tricks that you used to be able to do on a pure fiat money, where you just sort of devalue everything. Okay, we're going to have a new currency now, and it's worth 1/10 of what it was last year or whatever. And this is such a common thing everywhere other than Western Europe and the United States and maybe Asia. But you can't do that trick anymore, because you do that trick, you're instantly done. Like there's no, you dollarize very quickly, or people go on the Bitcoin standard or something like that. And that seems to be the end game that we're headed towards as these interest rates get really high in order to attract capital.
Excellent. So to secure your money, going forward, is a very important decision to make once you are considering doing investments. And of course, we had an anti-fragile asset, which is Bitcoin, like gold or like real estate, for instance, which are absolutely assets. Blocked out of this impact of devaluation of governmental currencies, which is we are here trying to wrap up what we have said so far. Very last question to yourself. You have now 4 books, correct? That you authored. For people which are beginning right now and entering this market, starting to know about Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, and how all this new industry works, which one would you recommend for the people which are hearing us now?
Well, so it depends on sort of what aspect you're most familiar with. So if you're a programmer, programming Bitcoin is a perfectly fine one to get started because it teaches you all of the innards of programming Bitcoin. And you learn all of the structures, maybe not so much of the economics and so on. If you are, you've been living in a developing country or something like that, the Little Bitcoin book, which has a Portuguese translation, by the way, that's
excellent.
O Pequeno Libro Bitcoin, something like that.
You're gonna see the link just down this video.
Yeah. So that one exists for people to just sort of understand how the dollar works and why Bitcoin is the solution. Thank God for Bitcoin. That's more for people that are looking at it from a moral perspective. It's written for Christians, and it gives the moral argument for why you need to care about money. It's theft at a grand scale, and if you agree that theft is wrong, then Bitcoin is a way to get out from under a system of theft. And finally, if you're somewhat into politics or policy or something like that, Bitcoin and the American Dream gives you a good idea of, okay, what do these people want? Why should I care about Bitcoin? It makes the case that as a politician or regulator, you really need to care about it.
Fantastic. Jimmy, it was a great pleasure meeting you here in São Paulo at SatsConf. Congratulations to organizers of this amazing event in São Paulo. And thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Hope to see you in next events.
I'll be at many of them.
Any message to all Brazilians about Bitcoin itself? What can we expect for the future?
Yeah, so I think in Brazil, basically it's kind of an interesting country, right? Because you're not like NATO or anything like that. Kind of within that BRICS sort of like alternate reality kind of place. I think Brazil is very well positioned in that respect because you have countries like Russia who are completely cut off from the dollar. And I think at some point you can see China getting cut off from the dollar. Well, Brazil has a good relationship kind of with all of these countries. Could sort of like, along with, countries like India, maybe even Turkey and others, you can place yourself in sort of like this financial intermediary kind of role, especially if Bitcoin gets embraced here, and do a lot of this settlement. There are going to be new countries that emerge as a result of this sort of like bipolar world, and I think Brazil can definitely benefit from that sort of the world order sort of changing as we speak. You see like sort of Russia breaking away, and obviously BRICS, the B is for Brazil. I think there's going to be a bigger role for Brazilians to play, and embrace Bitcoin and see what happens, because this is not a bad place to be, because there's going to be some opportunities that people in East Asia or NATO countries are not going to have.
Excellent. Thank you so much again.
Okay.
Great pleasure meeting you. See you in the next videos.